ChatGPT or AI is just all around us, right? So also in our daily business, we should all try to use it as good as possible so that we can be more efficient, that we can get more information in a shorter period of time, and that we can focus on the more individual parts that are very specific to the company's problem. Just think about you have 5 twins in a team. They all think the same. They will just agree to each other. They will always run in the same direction and will be at the same place where they are today in 10 years because nothing comes from the outside.
Max, thank you so much for joining us on the Objective Hiring podcast. Great to have you here today.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Well, I would love to start with everyone's favorite buzzword topic at the moment, AI. If software was eating the world, I don't know what AI is doing to it, but something pretty amazing. And I'd love to drill down on AI in hiring and get a sense from you if you've already experimented with any kinds of AI in the hiring process, maybe dabbled anywhere. In particular, I'm interested in the screening stages of the process, but not certainly anywhere in the process would be interesting to discuss.
Actually, no, we are experimenting a lot with AI, but not in the field of hiring itself. At the moment, we are trying to keeping our hiring process as short as possible. So we only have 3 process steps until we would give out a contract or not. And therefore, I can imagine AI to be a huge efficiency booster to really speed up the process, right? Especially, as you said, at the beginning of the process itself. That's a place where you have most of the candidates, where you have all information in a written format in the CVs, where you don't have any human interactions before you make the first decisions, if you want to invite somebody or not. So I really am very optimistic that this is a field that won't wait too long until in the industry there's good common practices that we can use it to make the first decisions of yes or no. And with that, reducing the time that we need to make a decision. And with that, hopefully also being faster than our competitors, than other companies. And so making the deal faster from them.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is huge. And you touched on one of the dimensions there, speed, which is definitely underappreciated. Like any process that's manual, at some point, a human's going to be a bottleneck to that. Even an example as simple as a candidate applying at 5 p.m. on Friday afternoon. At best, someone in talent or whoever's doing the screening is going to read that at 9 a.m. on Monday, if you're lucky. But it could certainly go much longer than that. I even think about like other dimensions as well. Like at the moment, explainability is pretty minimal at the screening stage. It's like you would, in most ATS and HR systems, you don't really know who had rejected them or why or the exact rationale that they took, because it's kind of like a slightly subjective yes/no decision. So I feel like there's a lot of upside even in that element for AI to be able to explain why it did what it did.
I agree a lot. So especially for the candidates itself, as you said, it's that they often just get a yes or a no, a standard message or something like that. But let's just imagine that you have the time, or AI can provide all this information and can tell every candidate why something seems to not be a match and what they could do differently, or which kind of tips you would have to them. This would change the market immensely, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And at the moment, I feel like this is done in the way screening is done. I feel is so bad that the upside potential for AI to improve it is astronomical. And the general fears around AI and its negative consequences, I feel like are all almost reasons for getting rid of the current process. As in, people would say, oh, AI could be biased, which it could be. Hey, the current scenario is biased. Right? The current human-based scenario of screening the CVs is very biased. I'll give you an interesting example. So there's been all these kind of studies around the world done, which apply to various roles with CVs, groups of CVs, the only difference of which are the names on the CVs. And so they're trying to test if there's discrimination against a certain subpopulation. There was one in Australia a few years ago that Sydney University did, where they had, to cut a long story short, 3 sets of CVs. First set with first and last name that were Anglo names. Second set that was Anglo first name, Chinese last name. And then the third set, which was Chinese first and last name. And they just apply it to thousands of different roles, different companies, different cities, measure the rate at which their CVs got callbacks. The first group got a 12% callback. The third group got a 4% callback. So all else equal, if you apply to a job in Australia with a Chinese name, you've got 1/3 the chance of getting a callback. So that's the current scenario. Surely we can't do worse than that. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I totally agree to that. And yes, AI will be biased because it will learn from the past, right? It will learn from previous CVs and previous decisions that were taken manually. And everybody, every human has some prejudices, any things, ideas, what they believe somebody else is coming from or can do or cannot do. And this, where I think we also have a high chance in doing a change with AI by really giving external factors and saying, hey, please don't look at things like the name, like the picture. Don't look at, okay, what was the share between males and females in certain positions or whatever, but really take this as an just a subjective point and nothing that you need to or can make a decision based on that. So I really think that this can help us, if we use it the right way, to really be fair and equal to everybody.
I wonder if then the cool unlock then to eliminate or at least reduce the chance of that bias would be almost like a two-step process. So a large language model could easily, you could ask it to, okay, extract for me the skills and responsibilities and experiences from this CV, step one, then match these against the job description. So by the time it's doing any kind of scoring, it's not thinking about the type of candidate it was. It's not trained on, like the famous Google example from 10 years ago was, we built a model to look for the best candidates and just kept selecting the ones that had. You kind of eliminate that problem by just focusing on the already pre-processed data. Maybe then that might get rid of the potential for bias.
Yeah, I like the idea. And I think this is very well possible as well. So looking forward to seeing solutions like that.
What about on the candidate side of things? Like, have you already seen candidates using some of these tools, ChatGPT, either for the CV or during the testing stage or even the interview stage?
I have not seen it, or nobody has told me that they are using it, but I'm very sure they do. If not, I would be very surprised. I would do it myself. I mean, ChatGPT or AI is just all around us, right? So also in our daily business, we should all try to use it as good as possible so that we can be more efficient, that we can get more information in a shorter period of time, and that we can focus on the more individual parts that are very specific to the company's problem or to the application itself. So I would really love to see candidates using ChatGPT as they also do in their daily business to just improve the way of how they're writing the CV, of how they're answering things, and so on. So I think we just have to integrate it in our way of thinking, and not only in our daily business and work, but especially in the hiring process. And why not use it when results will be better, or when you can write 15 applications where in the past you could only write 5 in the same time, right?
Yeah, it would seem perverse to ban the use of it when you would expect them and need them to use it in the job. Indeed, if they didn't, they'd be doing themselves a disservice and be inefficient compared to someone who's using it. What about, is there any limit to that? Like, is there any bit of the hiring process where you would rather candidates not use ChatGPT? For example, in a live interview, which you find it uncomfortable if they're sitting there switching between an LLM and talking to you?
Yeah, so I think there is for sure a bar where it doesn't make sense to use it anymore, right? So I would also expect you not to listen to ChatGPT right now and just say what they suggest you to say, but really having a conversation between both of us. And I would expect the same in an interview process, that we just talk openly to each other and say, hey, this is what we think or what we don't think. And saying, hey, I don't know it, I would Google it or would ask ChatGPT. I think this is a very fair point, and why not to do. And maybe, who knows, maybe in the future, the standard will be that we communicate by getting real life information in our eyes or head or whatever, but then it's fair to do. But I think we should just not behave differently in an interview process than we do at our daily life during work.
Yeah, and I think for candidates, I would certainly not recommend using ChatGPT in a live interview. That has got to make it harder, not easier. If you're trying to read the answer of a large language model and concentrate on what someone's saying and listening to them and paying attention and answering, oh my God, as if an interview isn't stressful enough, that just sounds like a nightmare to me personally.
Very true. I also couldn't do that.
What about thinking a little bit further afield, like over the next year or two? Is there any bit of the hiring process that you think AI will be used in that there would be like a clear and obvious improvement or use case? Like we touched a little bit on the screening step. Is that where most of the value will be, or could you imagine it later on?
I was thinking about this question after our last short call, and I really think that this will be the first part where AI can play a big role because of the reasons I said before. It's a lot of data coming in, a lot of readable data. The first decision has to be taken without human interaction anyway. But looking forward, I think there's such a huge potential in AI for the hiring process, especially when I'm thinking on how today our traditional hiring process works. It's somehow insane. You're writing a job ad, you just post it out to everybody in the world. You hope that the right candidate at the right time looks at the job ad and thinks, hey, perfect timing, I take it. How likely is that? It's not. This is why today we're going out, we're looking on LinkedIn or other pages, see, okay, do we find a good candidate? Can we proactively ask them if they maybe want to join us? But when we're thinking this forward towards AI, why not having a system where you say as a company, okay, we have this job ad, we have this requirements, we have this wishes, and give me a pre-selected list of 10, 20 candidates who are a good fit to the job itself, but B, also likely to switch because of other parameters that you can maybe check how long somebody is in a company, how the company is doing, other layoffs recently, and so on. And when we can shorten this up, this can be super, super big step, not only for the company because it's easier, but also for the candidates because they don't have to take 20 calls with headhunters or answer any messages or whatever. They just get pre-selected job ads ideally at the right time. So I think there's a lot of improvement in terms of efficiency out there.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to think about where this is going to go because I feel like a bit of the problem at the moment is maybe a lack of high quality available data to do that kind of matching. Like you've got a candidate CV, a LinkedIn profile. You make a good point there about like other signals that could be collected about the company, layoffs. You're right. Maybe also, yeah, you could predict the likelihood of being interested in a move based on how long you've been in a job. That's interesting. So that's available. But then there's all the things that a candidate would get asked in the first interview or the second interview. That data's all closed off and hidden. If there was some tooling that sat as an intermediate level where it was you were maybe as a candidate proactively answering, here's the top 20 most common questions is going to cover like 90% of all interviews. If that data was somehow sitting out there somewhere, maybe then there's an opportunity for matching. I don't know. I feel like there's just something missing in the data quality at the moment in terms of what's available. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. And maybe the answer is a platform that is needed in the middle. I mean, it's similar like when I'm going to the doctor, whenever I'm at a doctor I never was before, I have to give all my information again and all the history and so on. This is starting to becoming a platform so that you don't have to do the same again, and the same happens in the hiring process. I mean, you come to another company and they ask exactly the same questions. What's your past? What's your motivation? What was the business value you did? What were good things, bad things? Why do you want to change, and so on? And just think about a platform in the middle where you just have to answer all those questions once, and they can be used and can be shared with all companies that you want to talk with or that you want to share it with. This could save so much time and increase the quality because you can use this time to answer deeper questions and to really being sure about, is this a perfect fit, and not just talking 3 times again about the same CV that you have and so on. And from this standpoint, I think it looking from miles away, this is just stupid how it currently works.
Yeah, it's amazing to think of the inefficiency. God, the amount of repetitive questions and answers that have been given in interviews is staggering. So there's got to be some big unlock there, I would have thought, in the next few years to make this more efficient. What about bigger picture? Like, what for you have been the main pain points in hiring data people over the last year or so? One of the ones I hear a lot about at the moment is like a high volume of candidates, maybe candidates using ChatGPT on CVs, those kinds of things. I'm hearing a lot. Is that something you've experienced as well?
Yes, for sure. It's the one thing is the amount of candidates, and the other one is also the quality of candidates. And I have the feeling with data being somehow still at the beginning. It's not an industry that is there since 50 years, and it's still not there that, okay, in 5 years we use the same tools, the same ways of working. This is not how it's working, right? So we are at a phase where we have far more challenges than we have potential employees that could work on them. And so it's very, very important that we as a company can convince the best talents to join and to jump on this board. And I think with that, a very crucial thing is that you really can find out who is the right candidate, and how can I make sure that we don't see after in the probation period or whatever that this is not the perfect fit. And therefore we really have to think about how we can openly talk about what we as a company can deliver, what the role can give the candidates, but also the other way around, what the real wish is that the candidates have, so that we make sure that we don't tell each other what we think the other party wants to hear, but rather openly and honestly talk about, okay, we are growing, we want to invest as a company, but we are not there yet. These are the things that we still have to do and to learn, and we need you to go with us through this stage, which will be maybe hard and challenging at the beginning. And it's not always like, hey, the documentation is there everywhere and all the tools are there already and the processes work. No. And if a candidate hears this and believes this, he or she will be disappointed because truth will look differently, right? And also the other way around. Candidates often try to answer questions like, hey, this job is perfect because what you write here and here and here, this is what I want to have. Yes, maybe, but maybe it's not. And then just tell it and say, hey, these are the things that I hope that are hidden there and that I hope that I find there. And then you can still discuss and see, okay, is this something that we will find a common ground in the future? And if not, perfect, then concentrate on other jobs and on other areas where you can move, and you don't lose 6 months until you find out, okay, it's not working as I would hope.
That's a great suggestion. And I couldn't agree more that hiring could be drastically improved if people were just more honest and honest and transparent from as early as possible in the process, even if it feels uncomfortable. I mean, in sales, you learn pretty quickly a quick no is a gift. And so you go on the first screening call with a candidate and they said, oh, you know what, these 3 things that you're saying for the role, it's really not for me for these reasons. Cool, thank you. Or vice versa. Oh my God, how much time have you saved? As you say, they could actually end up in the role itself, and that takes months to come through. So if you can sort out those mismatches earlier on, just saving everyone so much time and headache and heartache, probably.
True.
What about thinking a bit more broadly over the last few years? Like, are there certain trends that you've seen in the market, like changes in supply and demand, and how has that then impacted hiring?
That's an interesting question. Maybe not that easy to answer. I think that there was a lot of change in the past. I already said before, data is not there since a decade. It's quite new still. So at the very beginning, there was a big lack of people that do have knowledge in it at all, and for sure did not have long knowledge in those areas. And back then, it was very important to get candidates that are super enthusiastic, that want to learn new things, that are challenging the status quo, that want to move forward and bring the company to the next level. Where meanwhile, you can already hire for candidates that are out there and that have 10 years experience and that do know certain things and then can move you to a certain level. So I think this is one change that happened, so that in the past you had to really focus on getting people with ideas that want to implement new things. And meanwhile, you can balance that and can rather say, okay, I bring in a couple of people that do have experience and I bring in a couple of people that want to learn a lot, and together they can really move forward fast. The other part where I think a big change happened, luckily, is that in the past you often looked on the technical skill sets and you said, okay, is the person good in working with Hadoop or with other tools that were out there and still are. Whereas meanwhile, it's more and more important that the people are more focused on the business value. And this is something that dramatically changed. In the past, I still remember we had projects coming up from the IT saying, okay, we can now store petabytes of data and it's all out there, start using it. And then we started looking into it and we saw, okay, it's saved in the wrong format. So we don't get the information itself. So it has to happen the other way around and saying, okay, this is a business value and this is a technical answer that we can deliver. And the candidates nowadays have to prove that, whereas in the past, the wrong focus was on the technical part only, saying, okay, great, you can work with data science algorithms, that's great, but this alone is not enough.
Sounds like there's just been a maturing then of the ecosystem in a sense, because we're focusing on the stuff that actually matters now, in the sense that anyone in any job is hired ultimately to deliver some kind of value. So now we're focusing on that maybe more than we did before.
And with that also different roles came, right? So in the past, you rather wanted to have this unicorn that can do everything from importing the data, preparing it, presenting it, doing some crazy machine learning on top of it. Whereas meanwhile, you have so many different roles out there. It starts with data engineering, then analytics engineering, business analytics, data science. You have machine learning engineers, you have governance managers, data product managers, and so on. So the bigger and more professional a team gets, the more specific roles you need, and the more clear you have to be in whom you need in which areas, because till today, I think unicorns are not really existing, and you really have to cut it down so that the people out there cannot fill the roles, right? And that it's not just like a dream wish scenario from a company that you can do everything, but rather that you set up the team so that it's possible to achieve the goals from the company.
I wonder if the close-ish thing to a unicorn would be like the first data hire in a startup scale-up. What's that, almost close-ish, because they're going to need to be a bit of a generalist, can do a bit of everything, get the basics off the ground. Have you seen that before?
Yes, coming from my past, where I think now it's the fourth time that I'm building up a data team pretty much from scratch, and it always changes there, right? It depends on the maturity of the company and especially the maturity of the data department. At the beginning, you more need those generalists that are able to do all of those things on their own, that are pragmatic, that can learn fast, that ship things fast. Whereas the more mature it gets, the more people that join the team, the more you can allow to really separate the roles and the responsibilities there, and the more professional it can get. And then at the end, you will have a professional for all of those areas that can really boost and bring up the whole team to a new level, which would have been possible with 10 unicorns in the team.
10 unicorns sounds kind of exciting to me. I'd like to see that weird dream team. And what about when you're thinking of hiring into your team? I'd love to hear your thoughts on a trade-off between maybe two things, actually. So one is like their current skill versus their potential. And then also thinking about like the soft skills versus technical skills. Like, how do you think about this? What's more important? And to add an extra layer, if that question isn't already complicated enough, how is or ChatGPT changing this? Because is ChatGPT making, for example, the technical skills a little bit more commoditized and now you're thinking more about their softer skills and potential, for example?
Yeah, very, very interesting and good question. Let me try to split in two parts. So the first one was rather looking for senior people that join right now versus junior people that have quite some fire and intention, right?
Yeah, effectively, yeah, exactly.
So I think this is something that is very dependent on the maturity of the team itself. When the team is already set up, when you have the data platform in place, you have the processes, you have everything documented, you have senior people in the team that can teach others in how things are working, I think then it's very important to also bring in more junior people, maybe even people from different areas, different directions that come in with a different mindset, a fresh mindset, that come up with ideas that challenge existing things, that are eager to learn and that can then raise the bar and iterate together with the whole team. Whereas when you're a small team, as we had it before, you rather need this unicorn, you rather need this senior person that has seen a lot of things already, that has seen stage 10 of the company as it needs to be in the future, and that can already say, hey, I've made all those mistakes in the past already, so let's not go this path, let's go the other one. So depending on that, I think it's important to make a conscious decision, and if you want to hire for senior talent or if you want to hire for somebody coming in bringing new ideas and increasing diversity in the team. And coming to your second question, the technical versus the more communication part, I personally think yes, when we're looking more into the future, the technical part will become less important in terms of really executing on writing SQL statements and things like that. I think what is and will be very important in the future is that you really adapt to your changes and that you learn new tools, that you're open for that you understand what's out there on the market. And at the end, maybe it is ChatGPT, maybe it's something else where you see, okay, I don't have to do this task anymore, so I can outsource it to a tool and really deep dive into another technique, into another way of working or something like that. But when I think about how maybe 8 years ago, you when you worked with AWS, you had to think about, okay, how can I bet on EC2 instances? You had to put them up from scratch. You had to think about how this really works. Today, you have something like Lambda, where you just click on it and it's out there. That's it. So the technicality changes a lot, and it's very important that you adapt to that. And coming back to this technical versus communication, I think there is very important that you are very good in getting your information, understanding what's happening there, and really understanding, is it valuable for me or not when this new tool pops up or whatever, and translate this into business opportunities. So to me, it's more important that you understand the business value, that you can also communicate it and discuss with your team on what's your ideas, what's your thoughts, so that you can really improve how you work, versus you have technical skills in how to optimize a SQL statement, which in maybe 3 years isn't something that you need at all anymore.
Yeah, and thinking about it now, I wonder whether it's almost technical versus soft maybe isn't the right lens, because it's just that the technical skills are going to change themselves. Because yeah, maybe you're not going to write as much SQL or Python from scratch, because now you write a prompt to Claude, get that back and tweak it, and then eventually that's all automated. But you're still going to be using more software, because you're going to be using more large language models and more interacting more with AI. Especially if the ability to create software is now going to be 99% cheaper, surely there's going to be more software to solve more human problems. So if anything, you're still going to be technical. You have to know how these tools work, these emerging tools, but it's just some technical skills now would probably be not redundant, but getting close to that. And we're focusing on higher value kind of task, I guess.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And of course, you still need some technical basics, right? But I think what is very important is that you really understand what is happening in the background there. I remember an example from the past where somebody not from the data team took an image recognition algorithm, just tweaked it a little bit and tried to use it for a specific use case itself, and was wondering why it's not working. And when we were looking into that, we saw, okay, the training data is a complete different use case and different things that you had to look out for. So for sure, you have to just put your own input into it so that the existing layers can learn from that, and that the outcome will be great. And these are just small things that you need to know. You don't need to write the whole neural network yourself, but you need to understand, okay, what are the things that I can adjust and what are the things that are important that I really have to look into.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated to see where this will go. I'm trying to think of like analogies from the past of how other technologies have developed. So part of me thinks, well, everything's going to be simplified. There's going to be this abstraction layer placed on top of everything. You would need far less skills. You'd be far less connected to the underlying data science model that you're building. Everything will be kind of made foolproof in a way. Like, I guess, a car, you don't need to know how the car works anymore. You just drive it, you know. So I wonder whether it's going to go that way. But then surely at some point, someone needs to actually know how these things work and needs to be able to scrutinize whether or not we're going down the right path or not.
Yes, but this will be less and less people out there. So when I'm thinking maybe 10 years back, every data scientist was able to write their own ways of logics and hypothesis, put it into extended the algorithms and so on. Today, it's rather about selecting the right ones and playing around with that. And it just changes what kind of technological things that you have to do. And it's a bunch of companies that really do this professionally and then give you the right interface so that you can work with. And looking forward, the interface will not be for data scientists anymore. It will be like ChatGPT for every human out there, that it's so easy that you can just use it. But that's just iterations that will happen in every area in the future.
Yeah, what an amazing time to kind of liberate that level of knowledge and skill and computing power to almost anyone, anywhere in the world. It's crazy to imagine what could happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes, and then looking back to what already happened in the last years, it will be super exciting and much faster than we all think in what is possible in the future.
In your experience in interviewing lots of candidates, there must be common mistakes that they would make along the way in the interviews. I'm wondering if you could share some examples of those kind of common mistakes they would make and how they might avoid them.
I mean, the one part is a missing fit, right? There are a lot of candidates that are just not a fit of what the role needs itself. I think I cannot really give a good insight or tip to the candidates rather than trying to challenge yourself if you're a fit. But I would always encourage to try it out. But in terms of mistakes that you can do during an interview, which you later on will regret, to me is rather things like not being honest and trying to sell yourself for better than you really are. This in the best case, yes, it results in you getting a higher job title, higher salary, more responsibilities than you would get somewhere else. But on the other hand, it will also mean that the expectations are far higher and that you have a big gap where you can fall into, and that you have to pretend being good, learning on the way, instead of saying, hey, I know those are the gaps. This is what I need to learn, but I'm eager to do it. I'm very self-conscious about it. Bring me in. I will learn fast. You can help me on that. And I promise you in a year, I will be there and even better than that. And to me, this would be long-term the far better strategy for every candidate to say, hey, I want to have a company that helps me improving and developing towards the path and goal that I have, versus having company where I need to pretend that I'm a person that I'm not yet.
So it just comes back to that transparency and honesty again early on in the process. Yeah. I'll share an interesting counterexample to that, which is slightly amusing as well. So I spoke to someone a couple of weeks ago who was talking about one of their hiring fails where they'd hired a candidate, not really validated one of their skills. In this case, it was SQL. The candidate joined, and on day one, they're like, "Yep, by the way, I completely bullshitted you. I don't know SQL at all." So there's that. Okay, this is now our shared problem. What are we going to do about that? And obviously, the hiring manager was initially quite annoyed and frustrated because they'd been lied to and the candidate and misrepresented themselves. But interestingly, to the candidate's credit, they very quickly upskilled because they had the ability and willingness to do it. So they basically gained the process a little bit, knew, all right, I'm going to bet I believe in myself that I'm going to lie to get the job because I need the job. And then I reckon I can learn this skill within a reasonable amount of time, such that at the end of the day, everything will be okay. So for that particular candidate, it worked out. But for that one success, I'm sure there's probably 99 disasters out there where that strategy wouldn't work.
For sure, it depends on how the company reacts to that, and it also depends on how the um, how the trust develops based on that, right? So when I get a candidate who says exactly that, I say, okay, so we wait 3 months until you can start, and now you tell us on day one that you lied to us. So that's not a good trust base. It takes a lot of time to build up trust, but it only takes a minute or a day to lose the trust, and then you have to build it up again. So depend on how the communication was there. I would not recommend it and rather say, hey, I bet to you that I will learn it. Or I even say, hey, I will not start in the next 3 months. Until I start, I will have learned it. Just give me some tips where I can look into it, and I will learn it on my own.
What about from your own experience? So I was just talking about this other hiring manager. This is like their most memorable hiring fail, but I guess a fail that turned into a success story actually at the end of the day. What about from yourself, either as a hiring manager or as a candidate? Are there any moments that really spring to mind? Any particularly good or particularly bad memories?
But one thing coming to my mind, which is maybe a little bit similar to your example, before COVID times, back then when it was usual that you invite people to the office, going there to meet there and discuss things. We had a case study. We invited a candidate that came from far away. So he traveled there. Of course, we paid everything for that. And within the first 2 minutes, we found out, okay, he didn't prepare anything for the case itself. So we were quitting it quite fast, and also found out on the way, okay, he has some friends in the city, so he's also using it to visit them. And I think for him, short term, it was fine. He got some money from us, but of course, he wasted time for us, for him, and so on. To me, this was a learning that I said, okay, before we go into a case study, I want to have all the documents, all the working things beforehand, that I can check it, that I can see, okay, there's a certain level of quality. But what I learned during that time, which I did not foresee, is that this also helps me a lot to prepare for a case study, to prepare the right questions, to go deeper into that and really have more value in the interview itself. So for me, this was a lucky turning point, because I improved the way of how I'm hiring and the way of how I'm going into a case study and how prepared I am. So I'm thankful for this person that he did it, even though for him, I think short term it was also good for him because he saved some money for traveling there. But so maybe it was a win-win situation at the end even.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on his personality. If I was in an interview and I realized after 5 minutes I know nothing and I'm getting grilled and these people now hate me, I would find that very confronting. I'm interested in his demeanor. Like, was he kind of surprised that it ended early, or he knew what he was doing? What do you reckon?
It's quite some time back already. So from what I remember is that he suggested that we could have another interview where he prepares already, and he didn't think that he needs to do anything for it beforehand. So I think for him it was okay, and a little bit maybe of a surprise, maybe even. Maybe it was a communication issue. It doesn't matter at the end. I learned a lot from that. We have an extra safety net in between, and I have a way to ask better questions in the interview.
We've heard a lot in the last few years, several years, about diversity especially within tech, but in all companies, I suppose. And there's been various ways to kind of address this. At the most extreme end of the spectrum, for what I've seen, there's a university in Australia, in Queensland, that as of about 6 months ago, removed merit-based hiring completely from their ethos or whatever their rules, and replaced it purely with positive discrimination. So as in hiring people based on their race, gender, and some other factor, age perhaps, in an effort, in their eyes, to address some inequities and to have a more diverse work culture. At least that's what they purport to have. What are your thoughts on that approach? Is that at odds with merit-based hiring? Do you think there needs to be quotas if we have ways to measure instead? Like, I'd love to get your thoughts on that whole space.
Yeah. So first of all, in general, I think from a company's perspective, it is super, super valuable to really invest time into thinking about it and in trying to push for more diversity in a team. Just think about you have 5 twins in a team. They all think the same. They will just agree to each other. They will always run in the same direction and will be at the same place where they are today in 10 years, because nothing comes from the outside, right? So what you want to achieve as a company is really bring in diversity, bring in people from different backgrounds. This not only includes backgrounds in terms of what kind of things you studied or what the previous companies were that you worked for, but it also includes backgrounds like how did you grow up and what were the learnings that you had along the way. And you won't be able to have that by only hiring a certain range of the spectrum, right? So you really have to try to foster that and then to make it natural that you're hiring for all kind of groups, that you include all of them. And currently, I think from a cultural perspective, or the standpoint where we are as a culture itself, we need to proactively work for that, because when we just leave it as it is, it will stay unequal and it will fire, as we said before, AI algorithms. They will promote men because obviously it seems like they get the job very often looking in the past, but this is not the thing that we want in the future, right? And so I think it is very good to think about it and how to answer that. Quotas is one example how we can foster that. I think this alone cannot be the answer. It gives you an idea to start with, or to bring you something into your brain to think about, okay, why do we have this? Why do we need this? But a quota cannot be the long-term answer. This can be a starting point that we start thinking about, that we start looking into it and trying to be as equal as possible.
I'd love to get your thoughts on something. So I feel like a lot of the problems with hiring and the way it's traditionally done is because of a lack of measurement, a lack of clear objective criteria at every step, where the system is designed such that the best, however you've defined best, candidate is the one who gets hired. And if we just move to an aggressively merit-based approach, that would solve a lot of the diversity issues, because there's so much discrimination inherent in the system. For example, the example with the CV applications and just anonymizing it, so you don't even have that as a criteria, because it doesn't matter. You're just focusing on skills and experience and things that actually matter. If we just had this objective process, wouldn't that get rid of a lot of it, as opposed to saying, no, the system's broken. Let's deliberately be racist and sexist in a different way.
I think this can only solve it when you are already in an equal world itself. But it does not start with the job application itself that you're currently looking into. It started way before. It starts with school times, universities, with previous jobs, and so on, where inequality was happening. So if you would just put away all the other factors, you would very likely still prefer the people that were preferred in the past, and because of that, have a good CV and a good history. So I think we are in a stage where we proactively have to push other groups to become part of the team, right? And when this is solved, then yes, I think then this is the solution already. Just block the other things out, be open for it, and start hiring.
Could you ever imagine a scenario where it's like a trade-off? Have you had that before where you're like, well, objectively, we feel like this candidate is the, again, best, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes for anyone listening to this, but they're not the most diverse, again, air quotes. And is that an honest conversation, or would you always trying to hire the best person, irrespective of their background?
It is reality, and I think it's good that we have those kind of conversations where we talk about, okay, what are both parts? What is the functional fit? What is the equality fit? How fair are we? And alone having discussions about that and thinking about it and saying, okay, should I hire this person because this person is much better than the other one? Or should we hire the other person because actually they are quite similar and the other person maybe didn't have the chance to get to the same level? Maybe the other person coming from the outside will learn much faster because the other person came to the same level with different parameters at the beginning as a starting point, right? So I think it's very valuable and needed that we have those discussions at the moment.
I guess once you start getting into the weeds, then it becomes a question of what is the disadvantage? What's the trade-off between you grew up in a poor neighborhood versus you grew up in an underprivileged ethnicity?
Yes, and that's an answer I think you cannot mathematically answer, and you just have to openly discuss about it, think about it, and try to find your optimum, which never will be very subjective. That's will never be very objective, and this is a problem we have, I think. Not sure if AI can help with that. Maybe getting a bit closer to the real optima. But the most important thing is that we start thinking about this topic and that we start to try finding the optimum and trying being fair there.
Yeah. I'm just imagining now some kind of like privilege metric on a score of 0 to 1, where 1 is the most amazingly privileged person ever. 0 is, oh my God, you had no chance. You need help. And then there must be some solid research around like what impacts your ability to climb through life and collating those kind of 20 variables and then coming up with a metric. There you go. And that might be the fair way to do it.
I would love to see that, yes.
Well, Max, as one final question, I'm wondering if there's anyone you'd like to give a shout out to, like someone who you've learned a lot from in the data space or the hiring space, or anyone who just deserves a bit of a high five.
Very good question and a hard one. And there's not something where I would say that this is the person that learned me how hiring works or something like that. And I'm also the kind of person that is observing a lot and trying to get a little bit an idea here or there. Something that is in my mind, which changed quite a bit of how I was hiring, is when I had a peer and I interviewed together with him. I saw how he's writing transcripts during the interviews. I did the same, but he just nailed it. He had abbreviations for common things and terms. He had certain topics and he had a way of communicating and writing it together. And when the interview was done, he made click and everything was uploaded and he was done while I was sitting there 10, 15 minutes, wrapping it up, making my ideas again. Okay, what did I mean with this comment and so on? So I learned a lot from that. Meanwhile, I have my own logic of doing that and think I'm much more efficient than I was back then.
Oh, that's a great shout out. It's something very specific and a pain point I've had myself, not just in interviews, but in sales calls as well. My notes are always a chaotic mess after the fact. And I had to go back and do that rejigging you mentioned. So a good shout out there. Well, Max, it's been a Great conversation, really insightful, really interesting. Great to hear your perspective on a wide variety of topics. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure.